Before we get into today's show, I just want to add a quick reminder that any donations given to our nonprofit, Better Burma, will be shared directly with those in Myanmar who need it most. Any and all donations will make such a difference right now. Go to insightmyanmar.org/donation if you would like to contribute, or stay tuned to the end of the episode and hear more options. With that, let's get into the show. I welcome listeners to this episode of Insight Myanmar podcast. We're going to be speaking with Leon Kennedy, and we're going to be looking into his life story, which brings us very far from Myanmar in learning about his background and his life experiences. But this is one of those interviews that is able to connect Myanmar, Burmese culture, in this case, a Burmese lineage of meditation in the form of SN Goenka, that is able to show the perhaps surprising and unexpected connection that this Burmese export of meditation can have in some of the most unlikely of places and life stories. And so we're going to see where Leon's story intersects with the practice of the Burmese practice of Vipassana meditation. And I'm really excited to get into that today with you, Leon. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor and a privilege. Thank you very much.
So we're going to get later into your story where you found the particular spiritual practice of Vipassana meditation. Before we do, there's a lot to cover in your own story. And before we actually get to your story, there's a lot to cover in your family story. So tell us first about the family that you came from.
Well, okay. Generally, I, as a rule of thumb, have always shied away from talking about my family because I felt like I defamed and ashamed the family so hard, shamed them, the family name. On both sides of my family, I was born to Yvonne and Leon Kennedy. My mother's father was Joseph Eccles Lowry, who was the founder of SCLC. He and Martin Luther King, they brought Martin Luther King into the organization. They founded it together. Ralph Abernathy, all of these cats were my uncles, so to speak. Andrew Youngs and all of the Shuttlesworths and the Abraham Woods, the entire civil rights movement was they were always there. They were family, so to speak. My father's side in Alabama, my father, his family was educators as well. They had junior colleges named after them, founded them, built them up. They were all about the community and service and education. So I had all the opportunities. The silver spoon was in my mouth. All the right diamonds were there for me to wear, so to speak. All the jewels were there, and I was my grandparents. I grew up in the civil rights movement. I'm a 60s babe. I'm born in 1967. So I've been marching since I've been a little bitty fella, since I could walk. And from the March on Washington to the March on Selma, I didn't see a lot of violence, but I did see racism at its finest because I remind you, I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. I was born in Atlanta, Emory University. We moved. My father's family is from Birmingham, Alabama. My parents were going to Clark. My father was in law school. My mom was in, they were going to Clark and Emory. So ended up, I stayed with my grandparents all the time and my aunts, my mother's sisters. So I ended up, learning a lot of stuff about the movement, the Middle East. This is back during the time when uh, Arafat and Palestine, the same stuff that's going on right now was going on back then. And my grandfather, he, Andrew Young, Jesse Jackson, they all went over there, and the federal government labeled them as terrorists uh, for dealing with another nation, a terrorist nation dealing with Palestine, the Palestinians. They were trying to push the peace issue between Israel and Palestine back then. So those were my role models. These were the guys. The first time I went to the barber shop, these are the people who were taking me to the barber shop. So fast forward just a little bit. We ended up moving back to Alabama, which is 2 hours away from Atlanta, in that Birmingham, where my father's family was. And my parents, you know, I'm the oldest child. I'm the oldest grandchild. And so I was somewhat like the golden child, somewhat. Some of you guys who are that firstborn seed, the weight that they put on us. Uh, and my grandparents in Birmingham, in Alabama, they they set out everything I needed to grow and be healthy and just learn. And my my mother and my father got divorced around about 12 years old, and that kind of destroyed me. I have five brothers and sisters, and I'm the oldest, so I used to keep all of them. My mom would, the divorce, because she got out of school just to raise a family, because they had he was a top notch dog at EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. He was an attorney. He surpassed all expectations. He's very smart. He When Clarence Thomas got appointed Supreme Court Justice, his job before that was the number one man at EEOC. My father was among those ranks when Clarence left. My father was high up, so we had a nice bit of money and things were good. But when my father left, things changed. My mother, I felt like would take things out on me, etc. The broken family syndrome. However, um, my mother, she instilled so much into me. She was I come from a musical family.
Mhm.
My grandmother, Evelyn G. Lowry, they're very musical. They sing, they play. So I have that talent as well. I'm a musician. I sing, I play, and I write. But I get it from them. And my mother was the same way. So moving forward just a little bit more, we're gonna go in increments. Trying to paint a picture here. Make it all add up and make sense. We as youth begin to, what the old folks used to say, like begin to smell ourselves, and you think you know a little something, you want to raise up a little bit. When I got to that stage, my mother began to see a drastic change in me. I was angry because my father was gone. My parents were divorced, and I didn't understand that. I felt betrayed uh, by my father. He left for whatever, whatever his reasons or justifications were. He left, and I just couldn't deal with it as well. So I started finding different role models, but I had enough inside of me to whereas I didn't stray too far from the grade where I came, but I was in neighborhoods and places where I maybe shouldn't have been, and I was just sticking out like a sore thumb. So mind you, I have all of these little siblings up under me. My sister is like 3 years younger than me, and then they're all like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They stair step all the way down. So I was the only father that they knew, and So I was very hard on my brothers because they didn't have a role model, and I was just doing the best that I could. So my grandparents, we still go back and forth to Atlanta because that's my family, my mother's family. We go back and forth. It's just 2 hours, you know. So it was a big deal, and I began to resent my grandfather and my grandmother. No, not my grandmother, my grandfather. I resented him because I was a grandma's baby. Because my mom began to go through some struggles, which many black women and black people, and I'm not going to make this a race issue because many women go through this when they don't have that income and the divorce and it doesn't go right. This is back in the late 70s, early 80s, and it wasn't like it is now when the women get half of everything. Nah, back then the courts weren't as prejudiced. So my mom was struggling, and I watched my mother struggle, and I had to learn at a young age how to go and pay bills, you know, because my mom, she got out of school to raise a family, so she became but she also was an activist for civil rights. She was a community leader. She was a churchgoer. We were raised up in the church, as most black youth. So I found my role models in the church, and just so happened my mother got us in a church that we would be at the church every day, and they had so many different activities, and it just wasn't like a zealot type of deal. We had activities where you're learning and you're learning scripture and principles, et cetera, et cetera. But it was a lifestyle. So along those lines, by the time I was 13, I began to really start to rebel. Uh, I ran away from home, came back. That didn't work out like I planned. Came back home, but anyway, I began to be rebellious and angry. I was an angry young fella and didn't know why I was angry. I was a rebel without a cause, if you will. So, um, speed up a little bit more. I get to high school. My grandmother used to always send me books, mail me books in the mail, about Black history, about other countries who are oppressed, whether they be white, black, whatever color, just people of being oppressed. She'd send me books about revolution and just change. And I would read those things, and I was trying to find my way. And it just wasn't working out because I didn't have a real role model. Let's scoot up a little bit more. So I get to the point I go to high school. My mother wanted me to go to an all white high school. It was on the outskirts. So we were the first batch of people to go out there, and it was rough because this you were talking like 1982 in Birmingham, Alabama. Mind you, this is the South. The mindset and the mentality in the South is so oppressive, both economically, whatever sphere you would like to place it in, politically, it's not a good thing, especially back then. And one would think that being it was in the 20th, 19th, 20th century, things wouldn't be like that. But it was in the South, whereas it wasn't like that elsewhere. But in the birthplace of the civil rights movement, it was ugly. And to this day, it still is the same oppression going on right now. So let's go another increment. I get to the point in my life where I feel a fight in me, but I don't know what I'm fighting for. I can't keep still. I'm, I'm chasing all the girls. I'm fighting. I'm fighting these white people at school who calling me. They wouldn't. I was a little bitty fella. I didn't grow until I got to be in my 20s, late 20s. I was always a little bitty fella. And at the time, they would say the N word, but they wouldn't call me the N word. They would say, you know what? You're not even that. You a neglect. And I'd fight them. And I'd stay after school. And they would bus us we were transit students. They would bus us from the inner city 30, 40 miles out to the school. And I would get off the bus and I would stay after school and I'd fight every one of them. I'd fight them. And so I ended up making friends with these same white dudes because they knew I would fight them. They respected that. But my mom would have to drive all the way back, come all the way from, the city way out there to get me. And so that was another hardship. So I had to go through that and we get back and she just thought I was angry. Uh, and I was angry. She had already, let's back up a little bit. She had already at one time when I was young, my mother began to, I told my mom one time that I was hearing voices, people talking to me or whatever, hearing sounds. And my mother took me to a psychiatrist. My parents were divorced. My mother took me to this psychiatrist, and after 2 sessions, he gave my mother all of her money back. He said he's hearing music. I've been hearing music all my life.
Hmm.
I've been playing music since I've been about 5, 6, 7 years old in my
Mhm.
grandparents' house. My aunts and my mom used to be my background singers. I was writing music and songs, and I still write and sing to this day.
What kind of music?
All kinds, except country.
Mhm.
All kinds except country, from classical to R&B,
Mhm.
jazz. I just don't do country. I do folk.
Mhm.
I just don't do country. But um, let's fast forward again. We go back. I'm becoming a high school teenager, and I'm drinking. I'm going through the high school thing, and it's a wild time in my life. It's a wild ride. I had all the girls. I'm performing. I'm, they're putting mascara on my mustache to make me look like I have a mustache so I can get into clubs. I'm playing in bands where these guys are grown. I'm too young to get in there. So they paint a mustache on me so I can get in. So I'm a keyboardist and I play drums and I play everything. So I'm singing, I'm getting into clubs, and so I'm feeling myself, Then life is good. It's all about sensations. So I think if whatever feels good when you're young, the big lie. So it started getting a little hectic. I started making choices that may not be conducive to the way I was raised and who I was raised by. And I was driving my mom absolutely crazy. And I started getting involved with people doing things I shouldn't have been doing and getting in trouble with the law. I was a motorcycle kid. I would race motorcycles. I'd race cars. Before the Fast and Furious, it was us. We've been doing that since the early 80s. And it was just a wild ride, life and death on every breath. And it came to the point I had a partner of mine who he I took the test for him to get in the Navy, and I passed it or whatever and got him a job on the flight deck. He turned that down so he could just be a cook. And as a sense of, you know, being grateful, he said, well, come on, let's go. We went to Florida. He would try to get me to go whatever state they would send him to. And he asked me to go to Florida. We stayed there for a while. We had fun. And he asked me also to go to Virginia. I said, okay. When I get to Virginia, I thought I could drink. I'm young. I thought I could drink. I'm out of high school. I went to college, by the way. I studied computer science. But while I was in school, I left with him to Virginia, and we ended up on the naval homes on base. Now, these cats right here, they can drink, whereas I thought I could drink. These are fish, and we're drinking, and I was so inebriated one night with these men, and they left, and I was so drunk that I went out and I shot a man. He wasn't bothering me. He was minding his business. He was the epitome of a victim.
Mhm.
I was I was completely wrong. I was
Mhm.
so out of my mind, out of sorts. And I left. I came back all the way down to Alabama and I drove. I took his car and I drove all the way down. And the same guy who I was in the Navy with, I mean, that I got to give me in the Navy, he ended up testifying on me. So I got in some more trouble when I got back in Birmingham, Alabama. And Virginia came to get me. They extradited me. I was I was distraught because my thing was I'll never go to jail. You got to catch me.
Hmm.
And I always got away. They could never catch me. And they would know it was me and couldn't catch me. Cause I wasn't going to jail. I was scared to death. I'm a little bitty dude, pretty boy with a lot of heart, but I wasn't trying to ever go to jail. I felt like my freedom was everything. But I was doing things constantly that jeopardized that. So they take me to Virginia. I'm in the Virginia Portsmouth City Jail. I'm probably there 20 minutes and I've tried to escape. Some canines in the parking lot catch me. They take me all the way up on the seventh, eighth floor, so you won't be getting away anytime soon. The jail is sitting right on the pier of the ocean, on the Atlantic. It's right there. So I sit in there, and this guy who I shot, he ended up he went into several comas. I shot him in the leg. They had to amputate his leg, and he came to court and he couldn't identify me because he couldn't remember anything. And the judge sentenced me to 25 years. They were trying to give me four life sentences in 19 years if he died. He didn't die. So I go to prison in Virginia. I'm 4 or 5 states away from home. I don't know anybody up there. So I'm young. I'm homophobic. If you're looking at me crazy, I'm swinging. I'm not scared to fight. And I'm in prison in Virginia. And I ended up. They didn't have a band program. Didn't have music. So I don't have an outlet. Just playing sports and doing. What everybody does up there. I end up meeting some people that helped me get in a position with the administration where they found out I could play because I can really play. And I play a lot of different instruments. And they let me open up the band room. I kept on writing, and they allowed me to start a campaign against drugs and guns and practicing safe sex or whatever, because those were the type of songs I was writing back then. And I still do to this day. And this is in the 80s, 88, 89.
Hmm.
So I ended up making parole after 8 years, 9 years. I come home. I thought that I had fixed my mental thinking error. I thought that I got my stuff together. I wasn't thinking retarded or crazy like the rest of my generation at that time. I thought that I had it on the ball. But what I had done was, remember, I came up in a very deeply rooted Christian spirituality format. When I got in prison, you start learning different things. You find out things about other religions, etc. And so I left all that alone. I moved on. I tried Islam. I tried more science. I tried 5%er. But I ended up saying to myself, all of it was just something to control the masses. And I'm just going to do the right thing for me. Just treat everybody right. And that's going to be me. So when I come home, I think that I'm thinking I'm the man. I get myself together. I ran into a girl, my first wife, uh, and we get married. We fell in love. We got married. We planted a family. We got pregnant. I was working. I was still dealing with my grandparents, all of them. They were very supportive, but I always wanted to do it on my own. I didn't want somebody to say they gave you this because you're one of the Lowrys or Kennedys. No, I did this myself. Leon did this. I wanted to be self-made, and I felt like I had the wherewithal and the knowledge to do so. So I was doing pretty good. I was working at a lumber company as the first black salesman that they ever had, selling lumber packages. So I'm making more money than I ever had. That was actually my money, not my family's money. And we're living life. And one day, I just so happened to see. I took the guys. I had a customer. I needed this job done correct. He's a brand new customer. And I needed this job, this lumber load dumped right. So I said, let me take all these truck drivers to lunch so that I can, butter them up, help me out here. And I did. And I said, let me go to the bank and get some money so I can buy all these guys lunch. My wife had been ragging on me about using the credit card at all these different places for the surcharge. So I'm like, oh, whatever. So they tell me, well, your bank is over here. I said, no, the bank that I bank is not over here. There's no way. There's no bank like that over here. They said, yes, it is. It's right around this corner. We went over there, and sure enough, there it is, the bank that I bank with. And I was like, wow. It was in a place where a bank shouldn't be. Somewhere where you can't see the bank. It's covered up by trees, and it's like a cottage. It's not a bank. And that criminal element was still lingering in me, obviously. And I went in that bank and I got my money I got, and I took the guys to lunch. About a whole year. I'd been out of prison about 2 years. For a whole year, I kept thinking about why that shouldn't have been there. Why that bank shouldn't have been there. It was bothering me. It just stayed on me so long, an entire year. And I said, well, I could just go. And my wife is pregnant now. We're pregnant. The baby's on the way. And I said, well, maybe I could just, maybe I could, if I was on a motorcycle, I could do that and be gone. And I decided to rob the bank, but I didn't have anybody I could trust to go with me. So one of the guys who I knew in Virginia in prison, one of the guys I really respected, he was a 5%er. He was pretty even keeled. He wasn't crazy. He was just, he'd been locked up for about 19, 20 years. And I only did like 8, 9 years. And he got out on my birthday, and my ex-wife, she called me and said, look, somebody named such and such is calling. So it was him. He got out of prison on my birthday, and I knew that I could trust him. And he's from New York, and I'm in Alabama. And I said, look, you need to come down here, and we can do this right here. We can do this and get away with it with this bank. It's not supposed to be here. Because I knew that he was going to be down, and I could trust him. He comes down. We go rob the bank. Tracking devices were in the money. We got away. But the tracking devices were in the money. So they followed us. And they followed us, guys. They followed us to my house. I'm at home. So we're sitting in the room counting money, counting money. And my stepson said, hey, it's a policeman outside. And everything froze. I've got guns in here. My wife doesn't even know I'm home. I'm more afraid of her than I am afraid of the danger or the excitement of the bank.
Mhm.
That wasn't too tough for me. But I was like, man, if she comes in here and sees all this money, man, she's gonna go crazy. So sure enough, they had the entire subdivision completely surrounded, maybe about 450 law enforcement or agencies, officers from ATF, FBI, several municipalities. Uh, it was a big deal. And the tracking devices weren't accurate, so they didn't really know exactly which house, but they knew they were in the right spot. So when I went out and looked out the window, I saw my neighbors looking around. They're on the street, so I stuck my head out and went in the street too. But I got a gun in my hand, hiding behind the door, and I go tell my co-defendant. I said, "Look, they're all out here. There's hundreds of officers surrounding each house." He said they're also in the back, surrounding each house. You could hear helicopters overhead. It's serious. They had already shut the freeway down, uh, closed off everything outside the subdivision. So I said, let me go back and look again. I went and I told my ex-wife. I said, look, I'll be back. I had a bulletproof vest on. I took it off so she would see it and wouldn't freak out. But when I saw them the second time, I stuck my head out the window just to look again because everybody's acting normal. The FBI chief pointed at me because he had been speaking to several neighbors. Mind you, the tracking devices are accurate, but they're not that accurate. And he waved his hand to me, and I knew that they were looking for me. At that moment, I took my gun from behind the door and I waved it at him and I said, no, you come here. And I closed the door. And I went and I told my wife at the time, I said, look, they're coming to get. She didn't understand. She was like, what did he do? What did he do? I said, they don't want him because I didn't have time to explain to her because I knew things were about to go haywire. My co-defendant and I had already decided we're not going back to prison. So we're going to hold court in the street. This is it. This is part of the deal. When I came back into the room where he was on the phone with his daughter. She was screaming. And he was telling her goodbye. And we left and we headed out the front door with these weapons. I had a concussion grenade in my pocket. And I figured that out to distract them long enough. It was nothing in my mind that didn't believe I was going to get away, because I've always been, an action figure type dude and racing, car racing and all this stuff. But this was a little different. And just before we went out that door, uh, my brother grabbed me by the back of my belt and he said, bruh, if we go out here like this, they're going to come in here and they're going to kill everybody in the house. They're not going to ask any questions. When he said that, I was crushed. I was so gone on my own selfish whatever that I didn't even think about that. So I just
Mm.
fell on my knees and I just laid the gun on the ground. I went back in the bedroom, and I told my ex-wife, I told her, I said, listen, they want me. She passed out. She's like 6 7 months pregnant. She's big as a house. And she just collapsed. So I dove up under her so that her knees wouldn't, squish the baby. And I laid her down on the floor and I was like, oh my goodness. I kissed her stomach. I told the baby goodbye. We went out and surrendered. We went out and I got it. I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah. We went out and we surrendered. That was in 1999. Let's fast forward a little bit. It was a joint arrest, federal and state. It was the same case, but they named it different things. The state of Alabama gave me 4 life sentences and ran them all consecutive. The federal government sentenced me to 12 years for the same, deal. And I thought about escaping. I was very distraught. I had a lot of energy inside of me that was hurt, suffering, that I felt so ashamed what I had done to my family. That little girl. It was a little girl, by the way. She was a girl. I knew she was a girl. And she unborn, but I knew it was a girl. And I go to prison, and the whole time I'm in prison, I'm just thinking, how can I escape? Because you know, I don't want to die in here. This is not what I'm gonna. This is not how it's gonna end for me. So my wife at the time was saying, "No, this baby's gonna need you. You know, she's gonna need you." The little girl grows up in the visitation room. They ended up like 3, 4 years later running the 4 consecutive life sentences into one life sentence, and I make parole like 10 years later. The feds come and pick me up, and I start like 6 year in the Fed. My daughter is growing up. She's a beautiful young lady, but she's angry. She has anger issues that just kind of trickle down because her dad wasn't there. The only time she would see me is visitation, phone letters. She only knew me through the phone letters and visitation. And I tried, but it's only so much you can do because there's so much oppression and restrictions in there. And it was of my own making and doing it. I can't. That's what they do. I put myself in that situation, so I don't blame them. I put myself in that situation. Anywho, uh, I go to the feds, and my daughter stopped speaking to me. She's going through she has a lot of anger issues as well. 5 years that kid stopped speaking to me, and nobody knows why. Nobody. My wife and I got divorced. Uh, and so life is, I'm just free falling, so to speak. No pun intended. And my things started to kind of change because I'm programming the whole time I'm in prison. I work for psychology services. I work with all the groups, self-help classes. I teach them. Another gentleman and myself, we teach all the self-help classes. I'm in an over-the-drug program. I'm in drug treatment, and I wasn't an addict, but I just programmed because that's my family background. That's kind of like I was kind of cut from it, so I gravitated to it naturally. So I meet a lot of people. I'm the guy who, when they have guests or professors or whatever, we're the ones who the model inmates that going to take them around and speak with them, et cetera, et cetera. Meanwhile, my daughter, she's not talking to me, and every now and then I got a best friend of mine from when we were 16 years old. She was a girl. We were very, very close. Uh, she'd reach out every now and then because we were best friends, and we still are to this day. And she would reach out here and there, but I could never really connect because so much was going on in my life. It was almost like I didn't know. So boom, all of a sudden, one of the psychologists there, Vipassana comes into play, and they want to try it. So it doesn't come through at first, but I'm a part of the drug treatment program and psychology, and this kind of trickles down through myself and the other guy, OB. He's from Uganda. He's still in prison. He's still doing the same thing we were doing the whole time. We try to help people and be a part of the solution in a very, very dark place. And they handpicked us to be a part of Vipassana. It was a deep screening process, and we didn't know what it was, and we heard about it, and we did the homework and watched the films and educated ourselves about it, and we found out, it's going on in India, and we had a psychologist at the time who was brilliant enough to want to introduce this in a system, you guys, where it's slavery. Bottom line, you are not a human anymore. when you come in the Alabama prison system, it's the culture. You are less than a man or a woman because the women go through the same thing. It's the culture. It's how they teach them to treat us. And that's why it's such an animalistic and barbaric system because that's how it's framed up. And we ended up doing Vipassana. And it was one of the greatest experiences in my life. Um, by the fourth day, I was, I couldn't, I had a crying crisis. I was weeping from my soul and I couldn't stop. And for those of us who know about Vipassana, that insight, it's just you and that mat. And I'm dealing with it. And sometimes I do good and sometimes I wouldn't. But I dealt with it. And as it progressed, I progressed. Things started changing. OB and I, we converted the gym. We were over it. We had to transfer a penitentiary gym at a level 6 institution, one of the worst prisons in the country. We transformed that gym into a meditation center, a place of peace and serenity. And it was amazing. It was something I'll never forget. We finished the course. It was a success. And they were like, because this was such a success, Jonathan and Bruce, and it was such a success that we're going to do it again. But this time, we're going to be using you, Leon, and OB as assistants to the teachers. So that was such an honor, and we took so much pride in protecting the program and protecting the integrity of the program. It was no foolery, no goofing around with this because we knew that the administration did not want this to succeed. The chaplain was considering it devil worship because it was getting more attention than his, you know, what he believed in. And mind you, I was a Christian. I skipped over one thing. I'm on the rec yard one day. This is before Vipassana, just before we did Vipassana in 2002. And I was under so much stress and pain, suffering. I just fell out on the rec yard on my face. And they told me I had a stroke, a cardiovascular accident. So I was like, wow, I had a limp and I didn't understand what was going on. And I was like, woe is me. Why me? Why? Fast forward again. And I apologize for these segment fractured pauses and jumps, but I'm trying to create a picture here because it's all going to come together in just a second. We ended up doing the second Vipassana as assistant teachers and we learned how to serve. We were serving and it was a success, great success. A lot of guys completed it. We were 20 in and 20 out. We were the first in North American history of America for it to ever happen. It was a big deal. HBO wanted to do a film about it, Vipassana. Uh, it won at the Sundance Film Festival. It did a lot of good things. It helped a lot of people. It inspired a lot of people. It inspired me. It inspired all of us. We ended up going on ahead and getting to the point where the administration began to reduce our time to meditate. We had a special concession made where we could meditate in the same classroom where OB and I would teach these classes. And they started cutting off into that and they wanted to wipe it out. I ended up leaving, getting transferred. The feds come get me. I still got this limp. I'm tired all the time. My head is hurting. I feel like my organs aren't working. And this is like 15 years later. I'm in the feds and It's time for me to almost go home. And lo and behold, the state of Virginia, based on that old 1980s case, put a detainer on me and came and got me. I owed them like 6 more years before I finished that sentence. They came and got me and flew me back to Virginia. I was sick. I was really hurt and sad. My daughter thought I was coming home, so now she's really done shut down on me, and she kept getting her little hopes up, and they would be smashed. And I'm in Virginia prison. I'm still programming. I'm working for the warden. I'm still over all of the self-help programs, and I'm still doing the same thing. I'm still being who I am. I've always been a part of the solution. It's just in me, I guess. But while I'm there, one day, uh, I'm found unresponsive. They run me down. It was in December. They run me down the boulevard, put me in an ambulance, and they're hitting me with the defibrillator over and over and over and over again. And they're trying to close my eyes, but I'm looking dead at them. I'm looking exactly, I'm looking right at them, but they're trying to close my eyes. And I hear one of the EMTs say, "Don't hit him again. There's nobody's home," because nobody's home. And I couldn't believe what they were saying,
Mm.
and suddenly the guy was like, "Wait a minute, you know, he's he's not dead." I wake up like 3 or 4 days later. I'm handcuffed and shackled in a hospital bed with two officers sitting at my side and at my feet. I don't know where I am, and I can't speak. And I see a doctor standing over me telling me that, "Listen, you have MS. Your brain is completely covered with lesions. Your spine, up and down your cervical, your back, your legs, is covered with lesions, active lesions. Your organs are shutting down, and your life will never be the same. You'll never be able to walk and talk or anything again." And I couldn't even talk. I stayed in the hospital maybe 2 weeks. They took me back to prison and put me in the infirmary in Virginia. My mom, nobody knew. I couldn't call anyone, my mom, my family, so I was just me. It was almost like I was on the mat again, where you just got to deal with it. And it's nothing you can do but deal with it. But this was different. In my life, generally, if I did something and there were consequences, I could be man enough to deal with it. But this wasn't something that I did. You know, MS is a disease that they don't know the origins of it, and there is no cure. So I didn't do anything to get this. This wasn't something that I could lay hold to. And my family, meanwhile, when they find out what's going on, they're going crazy. Everybody's going crazy. Everybody's suffering, suffering, suffering because I'm suffering. I stayed in hospice in the infirmary in prison for 2 years. I had to learn how to tie my shoe, talk, walk. I used to be defecating and use the bathroom all on myself because my organs were failing. I've been on several different chemo treatments trying to stifle my immune system. And it's just whatever medicine they give you, the side effects have you taking other medicines to deal with those side effects and so forth. It just keeps repeating itself. So I was fed up with medicine and just sick all the time. But I began to get a little bit better. Things started changing. I was hurt. I was so hurt because I had dreams. I'm a musician. I'm a singer songwriter. They were telling me I'd never sing, play again. It's just not possible. They were taking me to hospitals in Virginia. Virginia is a hospital town, medical town. And those neurologists start telling me that you might be the 1% because you're not supposed to be able to do some of these things that you're doing. I began to get better. Uh, rekindled, reestablished my relationship with God because I was a Christian and I had gone back to my roots, you know, and I was incorporating the Vipassana as well to try to hone things in. But I was so angry still because I didn't do anything to make myself into that person I was, hurt, helpless. But everybody knew me. So when they put me in population, I had the whole prison trying to help me, and, get stronger. And I got stronger and I got stronger. And eventually I made parole. I finished the sentence completely. I didn't make parole. I finished the sentence and I went home. And that same best friend who I was talking about when I was 16, that pretty girl, she and I had been talking during this process when I was sick in the infirmary. And when we fell in love and we planned to have a family together and get married. And I came home to my mom, to her, and we got married. And we've been married 3 years now. 3 years now we've been married.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And my daughter now, I say gone, guys, 21 years. It took me 21 years. So when I came home, she was 21.
Mm-hmm.
Right now she's 25. So that's been my story. So Vipassana, to bring it full circle, I got better. I got stronger. I got really good and strong. And I started being able to do things that they said, everything that they said I'd never ever do again, Jay, I began to do. I mean, it was like, and I was just thanking God, and, but my practice, Vipassana, it wasn't as intense as it used to be. You get distracted because life is going on. But when it came time for me to focus, I knew how to focus on the breath. To this day, I do.
Mm.
I began to, in winding this story up, I began to, um, I got on a new treatment, and the treatment was working good for me, no side effects, etc. And I began to have pain in my back and my hip, excruciating pain, like unbearable, pain crisis type pain. And to come to find out, I had to have a hip replacement. The bone had deteriorated over the years of all these treatments, and when your bones don't receive blood because MS restricts the flow of certain organs, the bone would deteriorate. And that's what happened. I had to get a hip replacement. The hip replacement went bad. And right now I'm on a wheelchair and a walker, just like I was when I was in prison. So now I'm revisiting those same emotions that I was feeling then, helpless. I'm getting better. I'm getting stronger, but I can't do those things what I used to do. All of my friends, my teachers from Vipassana, I'm in deep communication with all of them now. Um, I'm an advocate in Alabama prison system. I lobby against the parole boards because the oppression is so great in Alabama prison system. It's likened to a third world country. It's terrible. They're dying in there at an exponential rate from drug overdoses, officer killings, and they're killing each other. It's terrible. Whereas it used to be the only level 6 in the state where I was, where LB and I were, it's like that all over at the level 4s, at the go home camps. They're killing each other all the time. And they're suffering so bad. So I advocate for them. I go and I lobby. Uh, go and give talks about meditation and my experiences. And because I'm not the guy I used to be, and I don't miss the guy I used to be, but I love who I am today. And it's been such a blessing to be home. My mom died a year ago. I'm glad she got a chance to see me come home and see me do good, and be the person that she knew that her father and her father's father raised me up to be. And I'm 56 years old now, and it's such a blessing to be alive and to be able to share my story. Hopefully, this will bring some light or insight to someone else's story. And I'm so grateful that you, Jay, allowed me to be a part of this. Thank you.
Well, thank you for just so openly and vulnerably sharing a life journey that hits upon so many points, and the imagery with which you give of the different stations that you went through. And there's some various parts I want to go back and uncover a bit more. What's kind of emerging right now to start with is looking at those intersections with Myanmar, because uh, there's a
Mm,
long history in Myanmar of democratic activists and those that are pushing for human rights and against military oppression.
mm,
Those who are not killed by the military are put in absolutely horrendous prison conditions, and
mm,
are political prisoners for many years, and show trials, and and just hidden away from the world. And I've spoken with many of them here, and many of those with their Buddhist upbringing, with their Vipassana upbringing, some of whom have practiced the same tradition of SN Goenka as you have. Others have practiced other Vipassana traditions in Burma, but to a person, they have expressed that the uh, the mental balance they were able to gain through their practice. And in one of a very tragic occurrence last year, one of the democratic leaders was executed, a state
executed.
execution, sham trial in Myanmar. And one of the last words he said was a note to his parents telling them not to worry, that he was continuing to observe his breath, and to uh, to know his mental intentions and his past karma, and that he was literally walking to his death, and then he was killed by this military regime with this this mental observance in mind as he was doing it. So bringing whatever sense of calm and acceptance as he could to that truly awful situation we can't even comprehend. But
Mm,
so many of them in Burma have told about being able to survive these conditions, as well as democracy activists that we talk to that are on the run and in hiding in safe houses, and trying to escape what awaits them from these military authorities, and have described turning their prison cells into meditation cells, and
mm,
using that as a way to balance their mind. In one particularly powerful story, one of the current democratic leaders now, Lin Thant, referenced how at one point when he would meditate, the prison guards became afraid of his meditation. They thought he was practicing some kind of black magic, and they would actually beat him whenever they saw him sit cross-legged, which eh, again just takes a new level for those of us practicing meditation in the free world, to think of that this is the one thing they shouldn't be able to take away from you, and that you are getting physically beaten for even getting in the position of mindfulness. And
mm,
so I'm prompting you with all of this background because I think we have a wide array of listeners tuning in. I think we have those meditators and practitioners that are in the West and that are interested in sharing a practice with you, and where their own spiritual journey in the free world is intersected with your very unique story. But I think we also have many Burmese listeners tuning in that probably has known someone who has gone to prison unfairly, and has either themselves or known others who've used meditation to get through a very awful and unjust and unfair situation, and have turned back and relied on that. And so it's interesting, it's beautiful to be able to bring your story from such an unlikely place into into their ears and to realize the connection that is
Mhm.
there, that some practice from their land, native to their culture, that they grew up and their families understanding, and which came to them as a refuge in the most unlikely of places, that in a place that was actually, as you referenced, was actually hostile to it because uh, of the deep Christian faith you find in the South, and the fear they had of this other practice,
Mhm.
that this practice would find you. There's something that's being shared. Your story is strangely very uh, something that is hitting an intersection in what's going on in Myanmar right now, with many of these democracy activists and political prisoners now falling back and relying on this practice in the terrible situations they're going through. And so, before I ask more about different points of your life, which I want to get to, I want to give you a chance to speak to this. I want to give you a chance to comment on how this practice was able to serve and support you in your time, as well as to have this understanding and awareness of an audience that's tuning in. It's not just a practitioner audience in the West that might follow the same practice and with a sense of freedom, but those in Myanmar that are continuing to struggle against this oppression, and whether they're in hiding or in prison, that this is a practice in some form, whether it's the exact technique as yours or not, that some form of Vipassana is playing really a critical role in these aspirations and this selfless struggle, not unlike the civil rights movement, really, that they're going through
Yes.
now. So just anywhere you want to go with that.
Okay. Uh, I can start it off. This is, and I'm sure that you and as well as others will be able to relate with this immediately. Suffering is suffering. I don't care how you try to put the pig on the lipstick. It's still a pig with lipstick on. Suffering is suffering. And we all, I think, are vessels, uh, individually comprised that have different levels of what we can contain. So although you might be able to suffer a little bit more than me, that sufferance is still suffering. So whether you be in Iraq, Afghanistan, Myanmar, or Alabama, Mexico, and you're suffering because you're oppressed, you're suffering because you're hungry, and they won't feed you, and the food that they're feeding you is not fit for human consumption. The food, the way that they're treating you is not humane. They're killing you. They're killing guys that you know. You're watching friends that you've done all this time with die from lack of being getting medical treatment in the so-called free world, leaders of the free world. They're dying in there from cancer, everything you can think of. The medical services are horrendous. They're under so many lawsuits that they get to the point where they uh, get confronted so bad by the courts, they just get another shell company and shut that one down and open up a new one. This is what they do. And meanwhile, your friends are dying in front of you. And I had a good look at it because I would be able, and I would be in a position whereas I would have to go based on my job to go and write letters for guys who couldn't write, that's on death row sometimes, that's sick, and you got to write their family for them, sitting out on the outside of the cell or in the infirmary where guys are sick and they're dying, and you're in there talking to them. You're begging the officers, let me go just be with him for a minute. Just talk with them. Guys that you've known for all these years. And you watch them grow, and you watch them die, and you watch them die, and you watch them die. So whether it be Myanmar or any place in the world where there is oppression and suffering, this suffering, these injustices have been going on since the beginning of time. Uh, it's a blessing to be a part of that cloth or person personhood where you can be a part of the solution, be a light in a shining, a dark place, just a spark. That's just enough. So, to my brothers and sisters in Myanmar and other places in the world where they are being oppressed, slaughtered, genocide, starved, enslaved, whether it be Vipassana, Christianity, Islam, or whatever it is, that special place that you find where you find that strength to where you can hold on, just to hold on. Hope against hope. My grandfather used to give speeches, and I used to hear him say that, hoping against hope. It took me a long time to understand what that meant. But until you are destitute, until you are devoid of everything that you thought existed or that was real, till you experience that, it's impossible to want to be a part of the solution. It's impossible to want to be an advocate. So I entreat, I beg, implore all of my brothers and sisters who have been through this, reach back because you know what it is in there. Uh, you know what it is. Suffering is suffering, whether you be in Myanmar, Palestine, Israel, Ukraine, all over the world since the beginning of time. The suffering is the same. These are no new ills. These are not new things in life. This has been going on a long time. I just hope that the people that make a difference, as yourself, in podcasts and platforms, yes, platforms such as this, to where you can bring a like-minded spirit of resolve. These are the people and places and things that really give you true hope, not false hope, true hope, to whereas you can hold on to something that's real. When you're sitting down in the state of Alabama with 4 life sentences, and there were men that had many more life sentences than me there, that's no hope. And guys sometimes get involved in things out of hopelessness and make decisions and a lifestyle of evil because they don't have any hope. They feel like they don't have nothing to lose. And
Mhm.
I'm quite sure the people in Myanmar feel that same way. And it puts you in a different frame of mind. The survival instinct can become brutal, barbaric. But saving grace is when those elements in your character and your spirit that still have that spark in it, where you can hold on to some truth and some wholesome things in spite of it, when you can hold on to your faith, your religion, your meditation practice, if that gives you what it takes, even if you have to die, that's enough. You served your purpose. It's sad, but it's a sad reality. And that's been my story. And I still live like that to this day. Life is so precious. There's so many people in the world suffering beyond measure, beyond what we in the West have any clue about. I notice all the time how you never hear anything on. I'm a CNN fanatic. I watch a lot of international news. Never hear anything about what's going on in Myanmar.
Yeah, yeah.
You have to go on YouTube. You have to go into different special outlets. The media hides it. They hide everything. So these people are suffering. Suffering is suffering. Until you suffer, you may not be able to empathize enough. I hope that that made a difference in everybody's fight, and I hope that everybody that's fighting continues to fight. Hold on. Hope against hope.
I also want to ask a bit more about your upbringing, just your background. Your grandparents, as you mentioned Joseph and Evelyn Lowry, the place that they themselves had in the civil rights movement. Joseph Lowry was called by some as the dean of the civil rights movement, but you also
Exactly.
ran in circles of Rosa Parks, Ralph Abernathy, Martin Luther
Hmm.
King Jr.'s family, etc.
Hmm.
And so you reference being a child of the 60s, also a child of the civil rights movement. I think maybe other African Americans growing up in that time might use that phrase, but it's very different for you. I mean, you're very
Yeah.
literally a child of these giants of this movement. And so
Right.
being a young person, being a child, and obviously the world, the conditioning that we get as children, that we don't have the context to really understand the things we're hearing and perceiving until later, when we start to realize the difference in whatever environment we grew up in versus
Hmm.
other ways of growing up. And so as you look back and you think about just your childhood and teenage years and these influences you had, I mean, you were your aunts and uncles were not blood related, but the people you called aunts and uncles, these are giants of the civil rights movement that are their names are etched in history books and biographies and statues, I'm sure, all over. You had interactions with them as a child, what you saw, what you heard, what you understood, dinner time conversation, etc. So can you take us back there to these childhood experiences and just describe what your understanding was at that time of what this whole movement was about from a child's perspective of being around these leaders, as well as the just what you were hearing from the conversations and some of these people as well, just your memories and interactions on a personal level with some of these great historical names.
That is an excellent, excellent, excellent question. Wow. When I was a kid coming up, uh, in my mind, they weren't civil rights icons or activists or revolutionaries, what have you. They were aunts and uncles because they were always at the house. You know, the news was always. I remember when CNN first, was a local station in Atlanta, and they would always be over there at the house, interviewing my granddad and you know, uh, the likes of you know Rosa Parks. That was Aunt Rosa. The likes of like Harry Belafonte. That was Uncle Harry. That was these were civil rights icons. Reverend Woods, Shuttleworth, Abernathy. These guys were family. They weren't superheroes to me. They weren't. It was normal. I remember when Vanessa Williams won Miss America. She came to the house, and I was a teenager then, and I didn't really know whatever. I just saw this fine chick, up there visiting with my grandfather, and
Hmm.
I went to meet her, and I was, trying to just, being flirtatious or whatever. My grandfather shooed me away. But these were the people I would run across and meet from,
Hmm.
uh, but as a child and seeing these people, it wasn't anything to me,
Hmm.
because I thought that they were related to me.
Hmm.
I thought that they were related to me because they would always be there, or they would be in places where we would frequent or whatever. But as I got older and I started to realize things, I wanted to be a part of it too. I wanted to be a part of it as well. Um, I wanted to be a part. I wanted to be like my grandfather and my father and my other grandfather because they were important men. They were big guys. They were
Hmm.
important men, and I wanted that notoriety. And I just thought that they were, phenomenal coming up. They were my heroes. But it took me a while to get to that point because at first they was like, if your dad is Michael Jordan or LeBron James, it's like, whatever, that's my dad.
Hmm.
It's not the same guy you see jumping across the gym, flying. But my experiences as a child, from Lou Rawls to pretty much whoever you want to name, coming up, um, but it also did this to me. Once I kind of figured out who these people really were and why I knew them, I wanted, it was something in me that wanted me to. I wanted to make my own way. I wanted to make my own way, not based on who my parents and grandparents were on
Mm,
both sides. I wanted to
mhm,
make my own way. So music was my channel. And when I was young, I sang background for Earth, Wind and Fire for a couple of nights, and I sang. I was in the music industry a little bit, and I thought that that was my niche. That was going to be my way to where I could make myself stand out like them. But it always brought me full circle on those principles, those pillars of character that I learned from those my grandparents, my mom, my dad. I always kind of, even when I was ripping and running in the streets trying to be bad with the bad boys, I still wouldn't go but so far because I was kind of all of the echoes from what they taught me were echoing, ringing in my soul, in my head, in my mind. Look, I've never claimed to be perfect, but I can say this: I paid my dues, So I'm not proud about what anything that I did, but I know I paid my dues, so I don't have no any guilt anymore. The guilt I felt from when I left that little girl, it almost killed me. That baby, that almost, I thought I was gonna die from guilt.
mm.
Guilt will kill you, you know.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, guilt will kill you, and that just really, and it still is an issue to this day,
Mm.
but it's not as bad as it was.
Mm. So you said that you referenced just now how there were these values and ethics messages that were ringing in your ears from your family as well as the non-blood relations that were basically like family. And I'm curious what those were because again, these are great historical figures. So as you said, civil
Uh-huh.
rights icons. Anyone can go to a Wikipedia page or a YouTube or get a book and they can
Uh-huh.
read who these people were and what they represented. But again, there is a difference between their historical feats and speeches and what it was like being in a room with them and being in a room with them as a 10-year-old or 15-year-old, uh, uh, even
Yeah.
more so that you just you can get a different impression and different things can come out
Right.
in those kind of environments. And so beyond the great historical things we know about these people, I'm curious, as being a young person in the room with them, eating meals, taking walks, having conversations, et cetera, the mundane things, and being a young person who they might speak to in a different way. What would you describe as, how would you characterize some of these ethics and values and messages that you gained from them at this young age?
I would say this, as a 56-year-old man now, having gone through all of the experiences collectively, I can say this to simplify it. They're just regular people.
Hmm.
They make jokes, they laugh, they do I mean, when you're there as a kid and a preteen or whatever, these are just regular people living life. They had a cause. When it came time for them to align that cause, they would do what they needed to do to uh, have a meeting and plan and decide who's gonna. The same way that normal people, the same way that, man, I got a perfect example.
Mm.
The same way that you and I plan this podcast is the
Hmm.
same way like normal people. I mean, it's not a grand. It's not a great big thing of grandeur. It's just like a normal happenstance that people communicate, plan, think, and talk, laugh, bodily functions. You
Mm.
burp,
Yeah,
people
yeah,
burp.
yeah,
It's the same way. I mean, but I get it. I get exactly what you're asking me, but it's always more simpler than
yeah,
not.
yeah, yeah.
It's more simpler than not. I mean, as I got older, uh, and I could see how they developed their speaking craft more, because I watched them grow as well. They got better and better at what they did. And
Hmm.
I was like, wow,
Mm,
okay,
mm,
it's an art to this thing. Just
hmm.
like with the practice and like meditating. When you first start meditating, no matter what kind of practice you do, you it's so strange and abstract to you at first. When you start learning a little bit about it and you kind of got it together a little bit, you get better and better. The more you do it, the better you get at the practice, that particular technique. And just like in those techniques and practices, you fall off sometimes, as would they, because they're human. They're human. They're infallible human beings. They weren't the history books and the superhero part. Uh, no, they were regular human beings, man. They
Sure.
they they cry, they laugh, they get upset. Sometimes they curse.
Mm. And what values or ethics did you feel was instilled in you through association with them?
With them, I got this common thread from all of them.
Hmm.
God, Jesus Christ. That thread right there, that commonality, those principles that come along with attached with those deities. All of those principles that come attached with them. And those principles are in mostly every religion. But those principles, be kind, be honest, don't lie, treat people the way you want to be treated, help somebody,
Hmm.
make sacrifices, have integrity. All of those core principles and values that we learn in every family, probably in every society. Those we are so much alike. There are so many common bonds and threads that bind us. We're not that different. We're not that different. The same principles uh, in Myanmar that they raise their children on are the same
Hmm.
principles that they raise them in America, in New York, or whatever. Now, whether or not we choose to adhere to those or practice them, that's a different ballgame. That's a whole different podcast, right? But
Mm.
um, I I just am so glad that people like yourself have the wherewithal to have platforms wherein these conversations can be held, because
Mm.
they're
Yeah.
not held and everything is about sensationalism
Hmm.
and drama and pain. But
Hmm.
these are the principles and the foundations that my grandparents stood for. They wanted to help people. They wanted to help their community. My grandfather here in Birmingham, who founded Lawson State, he wanted to help the black community. This is back in the 60s, 50s, where it was unheard of to have a black president of a university
Mm.
in the Bible Belt South, Alabama, the worst of the worst. My grandfather on my mother's side, Pops, Joseph Lyra, he wanted to see black people in the community thrive. Everybody wants to see their communities thrive.
Hmm.
That's inherent in us all,
Yeah.
in mankind, whether you be Chinese, red, yellow, it doesn't matter. Black, white. You want to see your community thrive because we are all one people. We all don't want to suffer. We want to thrive. We want to be able to see people heal, get medicine, you know, provide, eat, have shelter. Those things, those commonalities go for us all. We all need food. We all need shelter. Those things will never change.
Mm.
We're more alike than we are apart.
Mm. I'm also curious, looking into your Vipassana practice, the conditions of your practice are quite unusual to the way many people come to it, and being in a
Uh,
maximum security prison and having being able to start your practice there, having to go through the experience of much suffering as we all do on courses, but it's definitely the situation and conditions are different for you. But then you also come, as you say, you're a child, a literal child of the civil rights movement. These are values and ethics you're raised with, and uh, these great leaders and activists are your aunts and uncles that you're learning from at their feet. And so you have, I'm sure, just an acute understanding uh, of course, of racism, being an African American in the US,
Mhm.
but then not just the experience of racism, but also of the dynamics and conversations among these leaders of how they're trying to promote greater equality and greater opportunity. And so all of these things are ringing in your mind. And as you go into your Vipassana course and as you start to become a serious student of meditation, I'm wondering if this meditation practice gave you insights or had you look at the experience or the existence of racism in a different way that the intensive meditation courses gave to you, or reframe the civil rights movement or offer other insights about it that maybe weren't apparent. Because I think all of us, whoever we are, whatever we come in with, intensive meditation can often reframe or give additional insights into our beliefs and our experiences and our past that just kind of shine a different light or make things clear in a way that's unexpected. So I'm wondering if your experience of race or your experience of meditation had you look at civil rights and racism in America in a way that was different before you entered into those courses.
Yes, it did. Great question. Uh, Meditation made me focus on and reflect on. When you sit on that mat, it's just you in that mat.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when you would go inside of yourself and you try to watch the thoughts as they pass and not attach yourself to them, but sometimes it works more not than others. However, when I would think about my forefathers and what they had to go through, I didn't look at the mat made me look at them a little bit different because you had to hide. They couldn't, the meeting wouldn't be the same meeting that the public would see. They had to hide because they were trying to kill them. They were shooting at my grandmother when my grandmother would go to New York and be driving down through Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the KKK sniped at her. You know,
Jesus.
you know, they were shooting at them,
Mm-hmm.
trying to kill them, and they had law
Oh,
enforcement, etc., backing them up. So when you try to be an activist, it's not the same as you try to be an activist now.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
They can kind of remove you, but not like then. So
Yeah, yeah.
it made me respect them more because their lives were in
Mhm,
imminent danger.
mhm,
They were in imminent danger. They were standing. I was looking at some pictures the other day that I have of my grandfather and one of my aunts at a picket line. The things you see on the old documentaries,
mhm,
with the people in their face screaming at them, calling them nigger,
mhm,
get out of here.
mhm,
You got to this amount of time to be out of my town.
mhm,
I don't care. I'm going to bomb you. I went to, you heard about the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing?
mhm,
The church, that church shares a parking lot with another church called St. Paul United
mhm,
Methodist Church. My grandfather used to pastor that church in Birmingham. There were bomb threats at that church before the 16th Street bombing happened.
mhm.
So they they had to be activists almost in a low key level.
Yeah,
It made me respect their bravery because they were in imminent danger of losing life,
yeah,
being tortured and being tortured and hung and just shot or whatever. But and those things still happen today, but they were it was a free for all back then.
yeah.
And they were very courageous. And it made me, when I be on that mat and I be reflecting about my experiences, because I had some experiences too. When I went to high school, to this brand new high school out on the suburbs, way out, it's all white school. I went through it as well. But
Mhm,
so I understood what my grandparents went through, but I couldn't make a comparison or liken it to what they did because they were. they were in danger of losing their lives. They put their
Yeah.
lives on the line for the
Yeah.
movement.
Hmm.
Yes,
And they didn't know how things would turn out. Of course, the privilege of living in the modern day is you know how history turns out, but there was no guarantee that anything they did was going to be successful as a movement and that they were not going to be in great personal danger because of it. So it must really be something to step back and to think of that despite all the imperfections and bias and discrimination that still exists in the world and in the US today, that this country has changed to some degree from that time, and the credit for that change can go at least partly to your grandparents and those aunts and uncles that you were hanging around, that and their work and their bravery was what led to a societal change. That must be quite a thing to hold in the mind.
that is quite a thing to hold in mind. My grandfather used to say this. He used to say way back in the 80s. If nothing changes, then nothing changes. So much has changed, yet nothing has changed.
Hmm.
Today, in today's time, I look at it. So much has changed, but nothing has changed. They're still killing each other, killing them
Yeah.
in the streets. They're
Hmm.
still the governments and police brutality, etc. All of those things are still persistent. Voting Rights Act has been are in question.
Yeah.
All of these, and to your point, on a whole different scale, suffering is suffering. The
Yeah.
people in Myanmar, they're going through the same thing. But what
Hmm.
are you supposed to do? You're supposed to stop fighting. You're supposed to stop pushing forward. You're supposed to not be what everything in your humanity is fighting to be and do and live
Hmm.
for. You, it's the same thing. You got to keep going, whether whether it be to hold on to your faith, your religious practice, the breath, something in mankind keeps him pushing forward. Your higher power, uh, something in us that's the good stuff. So the same things that my grandparents and my forefathers were doing, there are people in Myanmar going through the same exact thing. History
Yeah.
repeats itself.
Yeah.
They're going
Yeah.
through the same thing, if not worse.
Yeah.
They're going through the exact same thing.
Yeah. And so, in looking at your meditation practice now, I'm also wondering how your meditation practice has informed two different things in your life. One of them being activism, and the other one being music, creativity. These are things that have been in your blood since you've been young. The activism in the civil rights movement, and the interest in all music except for country. and
Except
um
for country.
and so you were into these things long before you'd ever heard of Vipassana or thought of Buddhist meditation, and then you took an intensive course and it's become a big part of your life. And so in what ways has your practice informed, on one hand, your activism, and then on the other hand you're looking at creativity in music?
I learned how to uh, focus on the breath, and that gives you that late. I used to liken it to this when I would do Vipassana. For those of you that know about Vipassana, in my mind, I would frame it up as when you actually be doing Vipassana, I would in my mind, it'd be like a laser beam focus because you
Hmm.
have to focus on the breath, on that one piece of you. And so I would use that right there when I would need to really concentrate or gather myself and focus, whether it be music or whatever. I would use that as a pillar, even if I was going to pray. If I really wanted to, get close to God and and focus on what I was my prayers and just being one with him are, I would incorporate that so that I could be one, so I could be whole because it's of me. It's not outside of me, it's not something external. It's of me. It's the breath. And I would use that to hone in my laser beam, so to speak, and my focus to focus on what I'm trying to do. And it helps. It helped train my mind to whereas I can It didn't take a long time for me to, and I don't practice nowhere near like I used to practice. I don't. I just do it when it's I'm in a jam, so to speak. And just being honest. But when I do use it and I need to get there fast, I know exactly what to do. It helps
Mm,
me get right in line, and it's almost like you train. You've trained yourself, and your brain remembers. I remember.
right. Sometimes that background of practice can come in unexpected ways in those moments of trauma and give you some background to
Yes.
rely on.
hmm Gives you clarity when clarity's needed. If you can remember, because oftentimes we creatures of habit, when we get into jams, situations, it's almost like a reflex.
Hmm.
But if you can take time to reflect on what your training was and the principles of it, you'll come out better with it. And I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Same question. How often, how often does your practice or do you incorporate it in what you do now as you move forward in your advocacy, in your championing of human rights? How often do you rely on your training?
I have to think of how to answer that. For one, I have to say that I'm in a place of safety. I'm not at risk, as so many of my friends are in Myanmar, and so I recognize a certain privilege in that. However, uh, the first year after the coup, in 2021, I had it was an experience unlike any I'd ever lived through or known anyone who had, where I had quite a bit of, I guess you can call it secondhand trauma, where I was not physically at risk, but my mind and my energy was so much in Myanmar and in the pain that was happening there, both on a societal level as well as with my friends, that it was hard for me to live here. And it took some time to incorporate that. It was hard for me to talk to a friend about a TV show he had just binged, or a family member about some mundane concern, because living in these two worlds, in loved ones and friends over here that were having their own concerns in their life that were valid, and you don't want to turn that off and just say, well, I can't listen to this, or I can't be involved in this because people are being abducted and raped and killed and tortured, and that's no way to carry on relationships here. And so it was a challenge for me to incorporate the real danger and the the horror that was going on there, and wanting to play a role in, not just in advocacy and not just in being a friend on phone calls, but also in some of the humanitarian missions that we were supporting, and sometimes getting calls in the middle of the night about people that were literally on the run, needed a safe house, or
Yeah.
that vulnerable populations that were needed aid immediately for survival, and to be focusing the mind and the mental energies and the conversations on these issues, and then go to Walmart, and be in an aisle choosing, what kind of coffee you want to buy, and then making conversation with the cashier. It was just, it was absolutely bizarre, to
Mm.
and there were some breakdowns. I've talked about them on some parts of this, on previous episodes, but probably the biggest breakdown I had was, which, and I get emotional even recalling this, because it was such a traumatic moment, really, was I was taking a walk. I was taking a walk to relax the stress, and to be able to be with my sensations, really, and my breath. And as I this was the several months after the coup, and as I passed a house in the neighborhood, there was a teenage boy, stepping out of the house, and he was wearing all black, and he had a big backpack, and he had I think a baseball bat in the kind of hanging off the backpack. And he I think what he was doing was just going on an adventure like boys go on, of just kind of having whatever toys or playthings he had to. I used to do that when I was a kid, just have this adventure outside. But this is a time in Myanmar when teenage boys were, among many other people, were were going out in the street to do nonviolent protests against the military takeover. and a lot of them were being shot, killed, arrested, abducted, these other things. And some of the humanitarian support that we were providing was to those, both protective gear for those that were, when they were doing the nonviolent protests, they had to stop because the military became too brutal,
Mm,
just killing people on the street.
sure.
And also providing medical relief for those that were impacted. And so I very much had in mind, I had in my mind the young Burmese boys and girls that were um, wearing whatever they could for protection, even though it was absurd. They, you just look around your house. What are, even here in America, what are you possibly going to cover your body and your head that is going to stop a bullet?
A
Nothing
bullet.
probably,
Right.
except if you have a bulletproof vest or something. How many people have that lying around? And so I was seeing these kind of pathetic and tragic examples of young people trying to wear whatever they could to stop, to protect themselves, knowing that it wasn't protection. And when I saw this boy walk out of the house here in America, I didn't know where I was. I was really confused. I had this kind of break, and I I I was this Myanmar reality imposed itself, and this memory of the boys who walk out of their house to protest military oppression and never come back. These stories that we had been covering and we had been sharing,
Mm,
and I'm seeing a boy walk out of his house wearing this gear and thinking that, not rationally, but just some deep psychological thing, just feeling, well, he's walking out and he might never come back. And I just broke down crying right in the street. I just broke down
mm.
crying. Um and I had to like remind myself where I was and what I was seeing, because it was just the trauma from over there had imposed itself here. And that happened other cases as well. This was the most profound time. And um and I think this is a long way of getting to your question, but I think where the meditation came in, it came in a number of ways. I think one way was that when I would face trauma, and when I would face like in that sense, and and just a really raw emotional pain, uh, the experience of anicca really comes with me, of
Anicca.
impermanence, and being able to be within my body and my mind, and accept and absorb what I'm feeling, knowing it's going to change, and not looking for it to change, but being able to own how I feel at that moment, and live with it and stay with it, knowing that it's going to that this is not something I need to push away or be afraid of. This is how I feel at the time. But I think another way that meditation really helped me, and this is something where in talking with other people I'm involved with, I think it's a
Mhm.
skill I've been fortunate to develop and to have in the way I approach things, is that there's no real blueprint that I know of where a professional military overtakes a country, and then you have these normal people turned activists turned fundraisers, whatever I am, whatever these other people are, that suddenly are trying to respond to this brutal professional military takeover. And it's pretty baffling. It's a pretty weird and baffling thing to have to go through after the first when you first start to transition and realize that, ask yourself, am I going to do something? Can I do something? And you kind of say, yeah, I'm going to, let's see what I can do.
Mhm.
And I think where meditation came in to play a helpful role is in seeing that I had limited energy, I had limited resources. How I spend that energy and resources is a question I have to think about all the time because of that limit on them. And so I can only really expend energy or thought or emotion or other things in those situations where I have control. And where I don't have control of the outcome, it doesn't do me any good to get my emotions uptight. And I've had so many conversations with other activists where they've been so upset and so
Upset.
emotional about certain points, where for whatever reason, whatever those points are, we have no game. I have no play in that game. And if it comes to me, if it comes to my desk, if there's some kind of fundraising or advocacy or something behind the scenes or conversations, if there's any way that I'm involved, I'm going to be fully invested. And then I
Mm-hmm.
will have some anxiety and, thoughts rolling that I'll then have to use a different kind of meditative skill to be able to work with. But when it doesn't come to me, no matter how bad it is, no matter how hopeless it feels like, I've seen so many of my friends and colleagues really suffer under that weight and kind of be confused I'm not why I'm not feeling that depressed with them. And it's just, for me, it's like, well, I can't do anything about it. Why? And this is something I've learned from meditation. This is 100% what I've learned from
Mm-hmm.
meditation. And it probably took me
Mm-hmm.
10,000 times of observing the mind to learn it. Probably 10,000 or 100,000 times. I observed the mind getting lost in an emotion, which it had no control over. And then the outcome was something that had nothing to do with all this time I had wasted in this kind of emotional turmoil. And finally, on the 100,000th time in one or whatever it was, I was like, oh, I actually don't need to respond that way. I actually can sit this out. I can, this is not making a better outcome. It's not something I have any control of. I have limited emotional resources. I don't need to spend them here. And so that was something learned. It was something learned from meditation. It's not naturally how I am. It's not just a strength of character that somehow was inherent in me and not in others. I'm worrywart, and I'm kind of overcome by anxiety and self-doubt and all these things, probably more so than most people. But
Right.
this was one particular skill where I learned through the wisdom of meditation very profoundly in past years, that on the mat, I mean, let me be clear, on the mat, learning,
Oh
all
no.
of these 10-day courses wasted, because I mean, not wasted, but feeling like how much of that did I just spend in emotional turmoil of things I can't control? Like, why am I doing this? And then learning where that kind of on off switch was, to not entirely, but where I don't have a play in the game,
Mm-hmm.
then let me sit it out and let me rest. And that's been something I'd say, that kind of directly answers your question of one aspect of it, where when there's an issue that I really feel there's no I have no bearing on this, it just does not concern me. I don't think about it. I don't lose sleep over. I mean, sure, on a human level, I'll feel bad about it, but it's really just like, I can't spend any energy on this. And where
Exactly.
I see other
Exactly.
activists kind of suffering under that burden, where I put energy and where I have, where I am involved. Yeah, I'm not saying I'm far from perfect with it. I'll have the anxiety, the burden, the, mind rolling, everything else, but I'm able to delineate and separate,
Mm-hmm.
where I can't control something, and just however hopeless it is, it's like, well, if it comes to my desk, it comes in front of me, I'll do everything I can. I'll try to bring it on my desk. I'll try to talk to the right people. But if that doesn't come, and if there's simply nothing I can do, then it's a lesson from on the mat. I'm not gonna unwisely spend my time and resources and emotion, and then not have it left over for the things I actually can do. So yeah.
It makes sense. That is brilliant. If nothing changes, nothing changes, and you can only change what you can change. I
Mm.
love that. I love that. I think that we're on to something. I think that we're on to something because this has been good for me personally because um, the struggle continues on, and I dig it when you say I get it when you say like knowing the struggles and stuff that you've seen across the seas, and then here it is with this menial, uh, meaningless things that we see over here. I don't deal with a lot of people because it's amazing to me the amount of people in prison in Alabama. There's no other prison system like in Alabama. In Alabama, they're suffering so hard, and it's amazing to me the amount of people. It's mostly black people in prison in Alabama, and
Mhm.
most of the people that are helping and advocating, they either the families of the guys in prison, the women, and or white people, white attorneys. Where are all the black people? Because there's most of us, it's mostly black men in the prison. So where are all the black lawyers? Where, and maybe this is some of that civil rights stuff in my blood, but I
Hmm.
don't mind calling it out. I don't, look, I'm not scared. My mama
Hmm.
used to tell me, I don't think you got sense enough to be scared.
Hmm.
But where are all the black attorneys? Where are they? These are some of your quote unquote homeboys.
Hmm.
These are your cousins or whatever. Where are the black men advocating for these guys in prison? These guys are dying. And so when I don't deal with a lot of guys out here with these superficial things, when I've seen in real time how men are dying, I've seen guys just fall over dead on the toilet next to me just for being in prison so long and just got high blood pressure, just died right there like that. So I've
Hmm.
seen it. So I understand what you say when you say you've seen these kids and it's suffering. And so this other menial stuff over here doesn't really mean uh jack to you. It's like, what? No. But I guess it goes back to what I was saying initially. We all have different vessels of suffering. And whether you call it a value system or we all have different measures or we all are different vessels and can store so much or interpret it as such. And maybe everybody's is just unless you've been through something, you're not gonna know how the next man feels. And those are
Yeah.
the core values that I think that I've learned growing up. Until you walked in that other man's shoes, you don't know what it feels like. But once you do that, or you've seen it and been there, oh, you know, and you're gonna look at it completely different. Maybe society hasn't suffered enough as a whole even though the earth is dying. And maybe they haven't suffered enough as a whole to want to help each other to fix it. You know, maybe I mean, like with the Myanmar thing, nobody's talking about it. You don't hear it on the radio.
Yeah.
You don't hear, and the media is blacking it completely out.
Yeah.
So until it touches home, that's when people start waking up. But by that time, you've watched so much suffering. So many people have died and suffered needlessly. Uh, the world is a terrible place right now. There are bright spots here and there, but and again, I know I might sound a little cheesy for saying this, but platforms such as this, such as our friend Jonathan, such as Vipassana, such as or whatever faith you believe in that's making you hold on and fight and hold on to values, your core value system, integrity, those principles. Maybe there is a chance. Maybe life will find a way. Maybe. Maybe we're onto something. Who knows?
And I think that's you mentioned something just now that's another real core value of not just my meditation but also professional life, and that's this sense that you how hard it is to understand another human and how much respect you need to have for uh, different conditionings, different makeup, uh, and the other shoes that someone else wears. That's something I've gained from meditation. It's something I've gained from my professional work and training and education and learning theory is how different we all are. That's also something that didn't come naturally to me at all. I was on the far end of the other spectrum of thinking that if I learn something, I just need to explain it to someone else and they should be able to have the same insight I have, which, I could not be more wrong and more kind of embarrassed and
Yeah.
recounting that. But that's also something that I really, that's what this platform is all built on. This podcast platform of being able of wanting to be curious and welcoming many different diverse viewpoints, informed viewpoints that can engage and can inform and can learn. I think when we talk, everyone wins. When we listen, everyone wins. But then also in Myanmar, it was a when the coup happened, you're looking at a complete breakdown of rule of law.
Mhm.
The everything from the courts to the police and military to journalism to elected government, everything you can think of, a complete breakdown. And all of a sudden, you have the police and the military, rather than being charged with doing anything to protect the populace, they are the ones who are set to terrorize them. They are the ones that are coming to burn down your villages, to poison your water, to abduct you for no reason, to loot and to steal your belongings, to bomb you from the sky, et cetera, et cetera. And so, you know, I don't want to say there's no blueprint for this in history, because unfortunately this has happened all too often. But I have never lived through something like this. I don't know anyone who has, and so that was another thing I had to adjust to when this took place, is just having a lot of respect and curiosity and patience and listening for those friends who were caught in this, knowing that they were making a set of decisions for their own safety and their own life, which I could not begin to comprehend in terms
Mm-hmm.
of the implications of it. If the entire police and military force of the country is now designed to terrorize and control and oppress
Terrorize.
you,
Yes.
what do you do and where do you turn? And that was where I became very passionate about wanting to tell their stories through their words. I don't want to be the ones to tell them. I want their lived experience to be able to inform those in that are more privileged in what they're facing and what they're going through and how they're dealing with it and why they're dealing with it that way, without judgment, and being able to just understand them, as well as to provide that humanitarian support that to those vulnerable populations that have had their homes destroyed and are, I think there's something like 2 million people now in Myanmar that are displaced, that are living in
Displaced. Yeah.
forests and
Mm-hmm.
refugee camps and open nature, just running away from this terrorizing military. And I think that's another, but that's just that was really put to the test in this situation, is that sense that you um the most you can do, the most I can do, is be curious and to listen and to ask questions and to realize another person's situation everyone, is inconceivably different than mine. I could share mine, they could listen, someone
Yeah.
could share theirs, I could listen, and we could both grow tremendously from that. But
Right.
my great life insights cannot be transferred over to others, and that was something that took me a lot of decades in life to understand.
Right. We all are different vessels of suffering. We all receive the measurement of that we all interpret it differently at different levels. And but like you said, until you walk into that man's shoes and that reality, you never know. Because before I ever got in trouble and went to jail or prison, I would have been just as guilty as the people, the people's ignorance right now about what's going on in there. I would have known. I wouldn't have known because it's not something that mainstream media. It's not a popular conversation. It's not a topic. It's not a hot topic, and meanwhile people are dying. Um, they're dying, and they're people that we know. They're people that we've been around them. You know, and I hate to keep referring back to prison, but it's the same thing. Suffering is suffering
Hmm.
because you when you're there, you're in the visitation room, and it's like a cycle of a group special group cycle that pretty much goes to visitation at the same time. Over the decades of keep going in the same room with the same people, you're watching those people grow. You're watching those babies grow into little girls and boys and teenagers. You're watching those parents get older and grayer, and then you watch those people die, and you're in there. So until you've experienced that, and especially this is I'm making reference to people who get out.
Hmm.
If you've experienced all that and you know what's going on the inside, and you get out and you don't reach back in and try to do something, man, to help that's that says something to me. That's
Hmm.
more dehumanizing than what the actual event is. Uh, it's like how can you go to Myanmar and go over there and know what's going on and not reach back?
Yeah.
That's that speaks a different discounting level of your humanity. Uh,
Hmm.
so so I have a big problem with uh, every city, every state, every so-called hood or whatever that's in America, and you know what's going on in the penal system, but you're not reaching in. and it's not a conversation. But hey,
Mhm.
who am I to say I would have been the same person had I never
Yeah.
not gotten in trouble?
Yeah.
So life is like that, and
Yeah.
like I said, I think we're on to something.
I do want to ask a bit about your music as we close out because
Uh,
you're not just a casual musician who does fools around with some things for fun. You've had quite a professional career. You've had associations, to name a couple, with Ludacris and CeeLo, and so tell us about what your music career and what you've gone on to do in the industry.
well, I've sat down, I've talked with Babyface. My grandmother, Evelyn G. Lowry,
Hmm.
she when I got out of prison in Virginia, the first time I got in trouble and got out of trouble, she set me up with Babyface. He sat down. I have a huge catalog of music, like 5,000 songs plus.
Hmm.
That the administration in Virginia allowed me to have a literal studio in my cell
Oh wow.
because I was doing all this music about no drugs, safe sex, uh,
Mm.
no guns, you
Hmm.
know, and they allowed me to get all this stuff. So I have a plethora of things. So my name, and look, I can play, I can play and I can sing. I do all the background vocals. I had a little studio in my cell. So
Hmm.
when I came home, my grandmother was so impressed. She lined me up with Babyface, and the industry is so wicked. It's just the industry is a scam altogether. Big fish eat little fish. That's the name of the game. But while I was in prison, let me say something about prison. Prison can be a university because you can learn a lot of stuff. The resources are there. You have to take that initiative. So I ended up learning a lot about the industry. So when I came out and I dealt with Teddy Riley a little bit, they the industry, like I said, I'm not gonna call people crooks, but the industry is full of crooks.
Hmm.
And I owned my publishing rights. I owned my copyrights. So you can't. I wasn't willing to uh, sell them for pennies off the dollar, and I turned them down. I was very arrogant. I knew I was, I knew I was good, and I knew that they knew I was good, and I turned them down. I dealt with a few people here and there, and my grandmother used to always say, and my mother as well, God rest their souls. They said, "Well, why did you? I still can't believe why you would turn them down." And they wouldn't understand the industry. They just wanted. They were like, "Well, you should just do it so that you can get your foot in the door." But I was younger and I was arrogant, and I was like, no, I'm gonna make my own way. But meanwhile, I've gotten married, so I'm not gigging and stuff. So I had to get a job like a regular person because I'll work as well. I'm multi-talented. That's just not one thing I can do uh, if necessary. And that was, the gist. I've performed a lot. I same background with Earth, Wind, and Fire for a little while during a concert
Mm.
phrase they had down here. Um, I've uh I've performed a lot of different places. I performed for a different at Clark Atlanta. Um, and we're supposed to be doing something, setting up something in the future, probably this coming year, with CeeLo and Luda, uh, as well on the ticket. I'm gonna open up for him. I've opened up for Angie Stone. Um, and the songs that all of my songs are original songs, and the songs in particular that I've been doing, songs about my grandmother, Evelyn G. Lowry. You know, uh, my grandmother brought Joseph Lowry into the civil rights movement because her father was a civil rights activist. There were several organizations back then. My grandfather, my great grandfather, my grandmother's father, he had it already going on. They brought my grandfather into the civil rights movement, and he in turn reeled in Martin, and the rest. But I am planning on, as soon as I get a little stronger, because I got some health issues going on right now. Uh, just a little. I still produce all the time. Right now, I'm sitting on the bed in the bedroom. Uh, I have keyboards and guitars all surrounded in the bedroom. It's like,
Mm.
my wife. the same best friend, by the way, that I used to have back then. You know, I got her in the band with me back when we were kids.
Mm.
We were in a local band back then, and she went on to produce and write and promote. And so we still I still do a lot of things, and I'll be doing some things soon. And when I do, you'll be the first person I send a copy of stuff.
Great.
And
That's
that's
great.
that's free. That's free airtime.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I've so enjoyed talking to you. Thank you so much for opening up and being so vulnerable with your story. I think that when we open up as speakers, it reaches a special place in listeners. And I, even as our listeners might have gone through different experiences, or perhaps especially those in Myanmar, something not so different, as you keep reminding us, suffering is suffering, and
Suffering is suffering.
there is a way out of suffering. And um,
Oh,
that is that is also a lesson of this. And so
yes, it
I
is.
really thank you for taking the time to come on and share so openly and publicly your story.
And I appreciate you as well. Thank you for inviting me and having me. And if there's any kind of way, brother, that I can assist you or contribute to your cause, your fight, because I feel like we fight the same fight.
Mm,
And this is it's more than a civil rights movement, it's humanity movement.
mhm.
And I appreciate you, and I consider you a friend for life.
Thank you. Same here. Same here.
I
Thank you so
consider
much
you a
for
friend for
this.
life. I pray you stay in touch. I got your number. I got your number. I got your number. And we stay in touch. And thank you so much. And I love this platform you have. If I can be of any assistance to you in the future, I will be.
Many of you are quite familiar with our nonprofit, Better Burma, which was formed in the weeks following the military coup and carries out humanitarian missions around the country. But did you know that we also have a shop that carries handicrafts sourced from artisan communities throughout Myanmar? We take great pride in all of our products being 100% Myanmar made, from the materials to the design to the workmanship. From the Thanaka artfully incorporated on the dolls' faces to the cats and frogs wearing scarves made of traditional Lungji fabric, they all clearly show they were made in the Golden Land. So your gift will bring a little bit of authentic Myanmar into the home of its recipient, and even if just a little, will help keep the people and culture alive in our hearts. And most importantly, your purchase will not only support the livelihood of the artisans, but also help fund our wider humanitarian and media missions. Please take a moment to visit our shop at alokacrafts.com. That's Aloka, A-L-O-K-A, crafts, C-R-A-F-T-S, one word.com. Of course, as is your preference, you can also consider making a donation through our normal channels. If you would like to join in our mission to support those in Myanmar who are being impacted by the military coup, we welcome your contribution in any form, currency, or transfer method. Your donation will go on to support a wide range of humanitarian and media missions, aiding those local communities who need it most. Donations are directed to such causes as the Civil Disobedience Movement, CDM, families of deceased victims, internally displaced person IDP camps, food for impoverished communities, military defection campaigns, undercover journalists, refugee camps, monasteries and nunneries, education initiatives, the purchasing of protective equipment and medical supplies, COVID relief, and more. We also make sure that our donation fund supports a diverse range of religious and ethnic groups across the country. We invite you to visit our website to learn more about past projects as well as upcoming needs. You can give a general donation or earmark your contribution to a specific activity or project you would like to support, perhaps even something you heard about in this very episode. All of this humanitarian work is carried out by our nonprofit mission, Better Burma. Any donation you give on our Insight Myanmar website is directed towards this fund. Alternatively, you can also visit the Better Burma website, betterburma.org, and donate directly there. In either case, your donation goes to the same cause, and both websites accept credit card. You can also give via PayPal by going to paypal.me/betterburma. Additionally, we can take donations through Patreon, Venmo, GoFundMe, and Cash App. Simply search Better Burma on each platform and you'll find our account. You can also visit either website for specific links to these respective accounts or email us at info@betterburma.org. That's Better Burma, one word, spelled BETTERBURMA.org. If you would like to give it another way, please contact us. We also invite you to check out our range of handicrafts that are sourced from vulnerable artisan communities across Myanmar, available at alokacrafts.com. Any purchase will not only support these artisan communities, but also our nonprofit's wider mission. That's Aloka Crafts, spelled ALOKACRAFTS, one word, alokacrafts.com. Thank you so much for your kind consideration and support.
What about Yarananga Unyana, Dadu Yadana Ganin Zadamana, we got a Besayana, Besayo. Oba Yarananda, Dayananga, Yaranaya, Dayanamba, Yaranam.